There have been plenty of memorable Super Bowl performances over the years, and obviously some stand out more than others. It's easy to remember great Super Bowl moments, but that doesn't always tell the story of a great overall performance. Of course, people always think back to big moments like when a quarterback makes a game-winning drive in the Super Bowl, but just because that player stepped up when it mattered most does not necessarily mean they had a great overall game. And this same idea goes the other way. Sometimes a player can dominate all game, but just not be the one to make the game-changing play even though they made it happen all game long, or maybe they even ended up on the losing end. Over time, some of these truly great performances tend to be remembered less and less, but these are what I'll be talking about today. Now, get set because this is my list of the greatest Super Bowl performances of all time. Before I officially begin, I want to quickly discuss a few honorable mentions that just missed my list. Like Desmond Howard's performance in Super Bowl 31, where he put up 244 total return yards and a kick return touchdown, which led to him becoming the first return specialist ever to be named Super Bowl MVP. Or Terrell Davis's impressive 157 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns while playing through a migraine in Super Bowl 32. There's also great defensive performances like Malcolm Smith's 1 interception that he returned for a touchdown with a fumble recovery and 10 total tackles in Super Bowl 48. Or Von Miller's 2.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 6 total tackles in Super Bowl 50. And there's obviously some phenomenal quarterback performances in the Super Bowl, like Jalen Hurts' 304 passing yards with 1 touchdown and another 70 yards rushing with 3 TDs on the ground in his losing effort in Super Bowl 57. Or Joe Montana's nearly perfect game in Super Bowl 19, passing for 331 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions, with another 59 yards and 1 TD on the ground. And how could anybody forget Tom Brady's insane comeback in Super Bowl 51, passing for 466 yards with 2 touchdowns? But there is another player from that same game that I feel like did a little more legwork than Brady, and he will be mentioned in the top 10. So without further ado, let's start this list. At number 10, I have Doug Williams in Super Bowl 22. In this game, Williams earned Super Bowl MVP honors after leading the Redskins to a decisive 42-10 victory over the Denver Broncos. Williams' final stat line was 340 yards passing with 4 touchdowns and 1 interception. And this is obviously a great stat line, especially for the Super Bowl, but I'm guessing some of you are probably thinking that there are other quarterbacks that had even better performances that maybe should be ranked above Williams. But at the end of the first quarter, Williams went down with a leg injury that looked like it might end his day. But instead, he returned, and in just the second quarter alone, he threw for 228 yards and 4 touchdowns. This catapulted the Redskins to a commanding 35-10 lead at halftime. Williams didn't throw another touchdown pass for the remainder of the game, but his masterpiece of a second quarter let Washington coast their way to victory, and in my opinion, this earns him a spot on this list. At number 9, I have Kurt Warner's record-setting performance in Super Bowl 34. Warner put on a show and came up clutch all game, setting a then Super Bowl record with his 414 passing yards, a record that stood for 17 years, and he also added 2 touchdown passes along with it. He made big throw after big throw all game long, and he hit Isaac Bruce for a 73-yard touchdown in the final minutes that proved to be the game-winning score. The Rams' greatest show on turf was at its peak, and Warner's fearless passing led them to their first ever Super Bowl win after one of the most dramatic finishes in Super Bowl history. At number 8, I have Buccaneers defensive back Dwight Smith's performance in Super Bowl 37. Smith totaled 5 tackles along with 2 interceptions, both of which he returned for touchdowns. He's the only player in Super Bowl history to do this, and he single-handedly put 12 points on the board for Tampa Bay, helping complete one of the most dominant defensive performances ever. His second pick six in the closing seconds put the finishing touches on the Buccaneers' victory. And while he may have gotten snubbed in the game's MVP voting, instead going to Bucs linebacker Dexter Jackson, Smith's performance is up there with the greatest ever. And let's be honest, what are the odds we're ever going to see another player return 2 interceptions for touchdowns in the Super Bowl? At number 7, I have Marcus Allen's performance in Super Bowl 18. In this game, Allen carried the ball 20 times, rushing for a then Super Bowl record 191 yards with 2 touchdowns, and this averages out to over 9.5 yards per carry. Allen's 191 rushing yards included one of the most famous runs in Super Bowl history, a 74-yard scamper where he reversed field and sprinted past Washington's defenders. His vision, patience, and breakaway speed helped him run over and around a defense that had allowed the fewest rushing yards all season, and it's arguably the most dominant rushing performance in Super Bowl history. At number 6, I have Redskins running back Timmy Smith in Super Bowl 22. Smith put up a Super Bowl record 204 yards rushing with 2 touchdowns on 22 carries. Smith was essentially a nobody before the Super Bowl. He was a third-string rookie running back, but due to injuries throughout the playoffs, he ended up getting the start in the title game. But because he was an inexperienced rookie, Redskins coach Joe Gibbs was worried Smith might get nervous, so he decided not to tell him he was starting until warm-ups right before the start of the game. This strategy proved successful, and Smith went on to rush for more yards than any other player in Super Bowl history. His 58-yard touchdown run broke the game open, helping Washington turn a 10-0 deficit into a 35-point second-quarter explosion with the help of quarterback Doug Williams. His final stat line of 204 yards rushing could have been even higher, but he had a 25-yard burst negated due to a holding penalty. Smith's performance remains one of the biggest surprises in Super Bowl history, and surprisingly, he never really did much after this game. So not only is this one of the greatest Super Bowl performances ever, but one of the biggest one-game wonders ever too. At number 5 is Patriots running back James White in Super Bowl 51. White played a massive role in the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history, though not necessarily as a rusher, putting up only 29 yards on the ground off 6 carries, but he did find the end zone twice. Instead, White came through as a receiver, putting up 1 touchdown with 110 yards receiving after hauling in a Super Bowl record 14 receptions. White also set the Super Bowl record for most points scored by a single player with 20 after he put in a 2-point conversion to send the game to overtime. He was Tom Brady's go-to target in the clutch, and he came through when New England needed it most, scoring not only the game-tying 2-point conversion, but also scoring the game-winning touchdown, making him one of the most impactful non-quarterbacks in Super Bowl history. At number 4 is Tom Brady's record-setting performance in a losing effort in Super Bowl 52. In the game, Brady threw for a ridiculous 505 yards, which is a Super Bowl record, and 3 touchdowns with no interceptions. Brady dissected the Eagles' defense in this Super Bowl shootout, keeping the game close through all 4 quarters despite limited help from his own defense. His deep passes were on target all game, but a Brandon Graham strip sack in the final minutes denied him another ring. And even though the Patriots lost the game, this still remains as one of the greatest performances in Super Bowl history. At number 3, I have Jerry Rice's insane performance in Super Bowl 23. Rice put up a Super Bowl record 215 yards receiving with 1 touchdown on 11 receptions. And he did this in a tight, dramatic game. His 44-yard catch late in the 4th quarter helped to set up Joe Montana's legendary game-winning drive. No receiver has ever dominated a Super Bowl quite like Rice did that night. He caught every ball that came his way from start to finish, and his performance was the key to San Francisco's last-second victory. At number 2 is Nick Foles in Super Bowl 52. Foles played out of his mind and delivered the Eagles their first ever Super Bowl win after throwing for 373 yards and 3 touchdowns, with 1 receiving touchdown off of the famous Philly special. A backup quarterback out-dueling Tom Brady is legendary on its own, but Foles became the first QB in Super Bowl history ever to catch a touchdown pass after this play. His ability to come up clutch every time Philly needed him to made this one of the best Cinderella stories in NFL history, let alone in the Super Bowl. And finally, at the number 1 spot, I have Steve Young's near-perfect performance in Super Bowl 29. Young secured the top spot on my list simply because he played the perfect game. He threw a Super Bowl record 6 touchdown passes, a record that still stands today, and not only this, but he didn't turn the ball over once. Young solidified his place in 49ers history, separating himself from Niners legend Joe Montana by earning a ring of his own. He was accurate, mobile when he needed to be, also rushing for 49 yards on the ground, and honestly, he was just completely unstoppable against the Chargers' overwhelmed defense. His ability to escape pressure and throw the ball through tight windows led Young to having, in my opinion, the most dominant Super Bowl performance of all time. And that closes out my list of the top 10 Super Bowl performances of all time. Obviously, the order and inclusion of some of these games is completely up for debate, so let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and consider subscribing so you're in the know when I make my next upload. But until next time, get set because I'll have another video coming soon.